Brentano's was a bookstore chain that opened in 1853 and closed in 2011. Thank you for your suggestion. Born in Austria, August Brentano immigrated to the United States in 1853 and started out as a paper deliverer. Soon thereafter, he opened a newsstand in Boston in the front of the Revere House, one of the city's historical landmarks. Then he moved to New York, where he again opened a newsstand of his own in front of the New York Hotel. At the time, newspapers and magazines were usually peddled from door to door, but the hotel keeper allowed Brentano to use a desirable space, some say because Brentano had an evident physical handicap. Regardless of that fact, thanks to his resourcefulness, Brentano created an incredibly successful business. Soon he began offering not just American, but also imported European newspapers, which turned out to be a great success. In 1860, Brentano's was able to open a book and newspaper store in the basement on Lower Broadway, and finally in 1868, an elegant store on 39 Union Square named Brentano's Literary Emporium. Brentano's would not only be New York's largest and leading bookstore, but also a meeting place of American literati. Among Brentano's friends were such literary giants such as Charles Dickens and Ralph Waldo Emerson. In 1873, he was joined in his business by his nephew Arthur, August, and Simon. In 1877, the three brothers bought out their uncle, but Brentano continued working at the store until his death in 1886. The first branch store for the company was opened in Washington, D.C. in 1883. A year later, a second branch store was opened in Chicago in 1884. The nephews expanded the firm and incorporated it in 1887. Simon, who had become head of the firm upon his uncle's retirement, devoted much of his time to the study of fire control and wrote a number of books on the subject. His principal work, which was translated into many languages, is entitled The Control of Fire. After some expansion, Brentano's dealt with financial difficulties as a result of the Great Business Depression of 1893, as well as a fire that destroyed all of its stock at its Union Square location. Simon sued his two brothers for dissolution of the partnership in an attempt to straighten out Brentano's monetary issues. The firm was then reorganized in 1899 with Simon as president. It was around this time that Arthur launched the Old and Rare department, collecting fine old books of great value as well as providing the service of locating privately printed pamphlets, books, and periodicals in foreign languages, including first editions and some out of print. This service brought Brentano's orders from all over the world and gave it international importance in the book world. In 1894, August Brentano was forced to retire because of illness, leaving his brothers Simon and Arthur to continue to direct and expand Brentano's, which they converted from a corporation into a partnership with Simon as president of the company. Simon Brentano served as president of the firm until his death in 1915. He was replaced by his brother Arthur, who was also the director of Brentano's Limited, London, and Brentano's Paris. Lowell, Simon's son, entered the firm after graduation from Harvard in 1918 and took over the responsibility for Brentano's editorial department. As Arthur continued to devote himself to rare books, his son essentially took over his management responsibilities. It was a period of expansion for the firm. Additional New York branches were established and stores followed in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. By 1928, the year before the U.S. stock market crash would bring an unprecedented 10-year global economic depression, Brentano's was the largest bookstore chain in the U.S., with 4 stores in New York, as well as individual stores in Chicago, Boston, Washington, D.C., and Paris. Unfortunately, the firm acquired a lot of debt in the process, and its creditors forced the company to reorganize in 1930 while still allowing the Brentano family to manage the chain. Even though the company continued to have cash flow problems, the company went ahead and opened its 10th store. The creditor-imposed reorganization plan of 1930 did not solve the cash flow problem. In March of 1933, Brentano's was forced by its publishers and banks to file for bankruptcy. With a huge inventory of expensive books, several new branches, and a big new main store, Brentano's was in serious financial trouble. Because it was one of the largest retail outlets for books in the world, publishers could not afford to see it go out of business. A publishers committee took over the management. The remainder of the Brentano publishing department went to Coward McCann. Then Stanton Griffis, a partner in the investment banking firm of Hemphill, Noyes and Company and a loyal Brentano customer, bought nearly all of the firm's assets. Efforts were made to find merchandise that could be sold along with the books, magazines, and stationery that are the backbone of the business. Sophisticated greeting cards by artists like Rosalind Welcher proved successful, along with items such as stamp albums and board games like Scrabble. During the bankruptcy sale, financier Stanton Griffis and Chicago bookstore owner Adolph Kroch bought the firm. Griffis became the chairman of the board of directors while keeping Arthur Brentano on as president. For his part in the bankruptcy sale, Kroch received the Chicago branch store and the exclusive right to use and control the Brentano's name within the states of Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Kroch kept his Brentano's store in Chicago as a separate subsidiary of his existing Kroch's bookstore until 1954, when the stores were combined to form Kroch's and Brentano's. Kroch later succeeded in preventing Macmillan, Waldenbooks, and Borders from using the Brentano's name within the Chicago area market. In 1944, Arthur Brentano died and was replaced as president by his son, Arthur Brentano Jr. 5 years later, Arthur Brentano Jr. was replaced as president by Nixon Griffis, the son of Stanton Griffis. Brentano's headquarters on New York City's Fifth Avenue was the largest bookstore in the city and the third largest in the country, with 250,000 books for sale in its 31,000 square foot store. The bookstore chain had some 20 branches from Chicago to San Francisco, including the Pentagon. One of the oldest and most respected booksellers, Brentano's owed its success to its vast assortment of books, the elegance of its premises, and the dedication of each successive family member to the business, hand-picked staff, and its customer service. Into the 1960s, Union Square was a book paradise, remarkable for its abundance of booksellers, the sole survivor of which is the Strand. At its height, Booksellers Row, or Book Row, spanned 6 city blocks, the stretch of 4th Avenue between Union Square and Astor Place, and encompassed nearly 40 bookstores selling mostly second-hand and rare books. The publishing company Kroch Collier, whose corporate parent was Macmillan, acquired Brentano's in 1962. At the time of the acquisition, Brentano's had 16 stores located in 5 states, plus the District of Columbia. In 1972, Brentano Books would open its first store in Southern California in Beverly Hills. In 1981, Macmillan would divest itself of Brentano's by selling the retail chain to Brentano's management. At the time of the sale, Brentano's had 28 stores with locations that included Boston, Washington, Atlanta, Toronto, Dallas, San Francisco, and San Diego. Unfortunately, the new management was forced to file for bankruptcy less than a year later in 1982 and finally liquidated in 1984. As part of the liquidation sale, the Waldenbooks subsidiary of Kmart acquired 3 stores that were located in Beverly Hills, Costa Mesa, and St. Louis, with the original intention of converting the stores to the Waldenbooks brand. After remodeling, while keeping the Brentano's name, Waldenbooks discovered that the stores were bringing in more money than equivalent Waldenbooks of the same age, so they decided to keep the Brentano's brand and expand the brand to other upscale neighborhoods as the upscale bookstore brand for the Waldenbook division. In 1992, Kmart acquired Borders, and at the same time it kept Brentano's in the separate Waldenbooks division until the formation of the Borders Walden Group that was done just prior to the Borders Group being spun off as an independent company in 1994. The Brentano's name and bookstore was featured in an episode of Mad About You. The episode featured Barbara Feldon playing a novelist in which her character was doing a book signing. Brentano's was featured prominently in a few episodes of Seinfeld, most notably in the April 9, 1998 episode called The Bookstore. Under Borders, the Brentano stores were still managed by Waldenbooks. With increased competition during the 1990s and 2000s from superstores and the internet, Borders Books was forced to close the money-losing Brentano and Waldenbooks stores. On July 18, 2011, Borders Group filed for bankruptcy and closed all remaining Brentano stores. So what do you remember about this place? Leave a comment or a suggestion for a future video below. And if you haven't already, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.
Bringing back memories from the good old days. That's super cool, man.